Hello and welcome to the CleanSlate theme development tutorial series. My name is Adam and today we are going to talk about working on CleanSlate themes locally with a tool called Hammer VM. So, before we talk about what Hammer VM is, I'm going to kind of try and lay some groundwork in terms that you may or may not be familiar with other systems. So if you've ever worked with like another CMS, maybe you've worked with WordPress or Drupal or Concrete 5, you may have worked on those CMSs locally, and you may know that you need a local server in order to work on those systems on your own computer. And that may have led you to download something like MAMP for OS X, which is basically a local server for Mac. There's also WAMP, which is Apache PHP MySQL for server for Windows. If you're specifically doing WordPress development, you may have heard of a tool called Local by Flywheel, which is kind of like an all-in-one app that provides you with a local server and does a lot of fancy stuff and basically allows you to run WordPress on your local machine with like minimal hassle. So in a similar sense, where MAMP and WAMP is a local server for your local computer, Hammer VM is a similar tool in that respect. It provides us a local environment for working on CleanSlate themes locally. So what I'm going to cover today, now that we've talked about what Hammer is how to install Hammer. So Hammer is for local development, and it is not for content creation. There's no like magic transfer content button. Is only for developers to be able to see the changes that they're making to their themes locally on your own computer. So if you want to find out some more information about Hammer, definitely check out the CleanSlate CMS site. Click on How To's Tips, Theme Development, Getting Started Guide, and then there's a page here that's called Working on CleanSlate Themes Locally. Here you'll have a bunch of information about Hammer, and you will also learn that Hammer VM is on GitHub. So I've already got this tab open right here. You can follow the link from this page or just open this github.com/wvuweb/hammer-vm. We're going to talk about installing Hammer, and there's a couple things to do here. So if you scroll down in the repositories README, it says how to install and has a number of steps. So we're going to go through these steps on how to install Hammer. The first one is to install VirtualBox. So VirtualBox is one of the dependencies that Hammer needs in order to install. If you are installing Hammer very recently to this, you actually need to install VirtualBox v6.0.14 because our next tool, Vagrant, hasn't actually caught up with VirtualBox 6.1 support yet. But probably when you're watching this, you'll be able to just hit the big download button for VirtualBox 6.1 or whatever version it is, because Vagrant will catch up. So what I would recommend here is if you just click the download button, there is VirtualBox for Windows hosts, OS X hosts, Linux. So if you're on Windows, you download the Windows installer. If you're on OS X, you download the OS X installer. It'll download. It's 50 to 100 megabytes. You click it, you hit next through the installer, and it'll install just like a normal program. So once you have VirtualBox installed, you can come back to the install instructions, and step number 2 is to install Vagrant. So Vagrant is another dependency for Hammer, and it's pretty easy to install itself. You would just click download the current version from the main page right here. And if you're on Windows, you probably want to install the 64-bit version if you have a 64-bit computer. If you're on Mac, you install the 64-bit right here. Linux, all that other stuff, same thing. You would click to download it, and it would open an installer. You hit next to install it with all the defaults. It's all good. and then once it's installed, you can come back to the install instructions. So we're going to move on to step 3. If you've had a previous version of Hammer installed prior to v1.1.3, then you should copy this command right here and open your terminal and paste it in there. I'm going to assume that you're brand new and this is a fresh install. You probably don't need to do that. If you do, paste it in there, and then you may have to run a plugin repairs that says copy this here, paste it in here, hit enter. It's all good. So step 4, you need to install Vagrant env. So you'd copy this here, paste it in here, and hit enter. I already have all these things installed, so I'm actually not going to hit enter, but all you do is copy and paste and hit enter. And then you move on to step 5. If you've seen our previous videos, you probably already have a sites and CleanSlate _themes folder. So if we look in our file system, and we go to sites, so this is my home directory, this is my sites folder, and I already have a CleanSlate themes folder. So I don't need to make these, but if you don't have these already, you can either make them via the Finder UI or the Windows Explorer UI, or you can just copy this command and paste it into your terminal. Note that all this is doing is changing your local directory to the your home directory or your root directory. It's going to make a directory called sites, and then it's going to change directory into the sites folder and then make a directory called CleanSlate themes. Since I already have all this stuff set up, I don't need to do that. But if you do not have your sites or CleanSlate themes folder, either set that up via Finder Explorer or copy and paste that step into your terminal. We can skip step 6 unless you are looking for a custom directory location. If you are on Windows, you might need to pay attention to step 6 and read about that in the documentation. Next, we have to actually build the Hammer virtual machine. So what this is saying is we need to change directories into the sites folder. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some of that here. So I'm going to say, okay, we're in the root here, and I need to change directories into my sites folder. So now I'm in my sites folder. There's the path, right, which is what this is doing. And then it says it's going to clone the Hammer VM repository. So I'm just kind of doing this one by one. Oh, sorry, that's not it. I'm going to just clone this Hammer VM repository right here. You can paste it in there, hit clone, it'll clone it. And again, I've already have it, so I'm not actually going to run these commands. And then what you're going to do is you're going to change directories into the repository and then start the Vagrant machine. So what that looks like is you would say cd hammer-vm, and then I type, and that is what's happening right here, cd hammer vm, and then once I'm in that directory, I type Vagrant up. So Vagrant up is actually starting the virtual machine, and the first time you run this, it's actually going to take quite a long time because it's got to pull down a bunch of dependencies. It could take anywhere between 5 and 30 minutes. But after you have the virtual machine built, it'll run a lot faster. It probably will run in 30 seconds or something like that. Since mine's already built, it's going to run very quickly, and you'll see right there it just finished. So you'll know that Hammer has been started and set up and running correctly if you see this, ASCII art Hammer right here and a bunch of green stuff. You might see some other red warnings here. For example, if you don't already have the code theme cloned on your machine, so this theme, which is available at our Bitbucket, in our Bitbucket organization here, we can type in code, and then we can hit clone right here and copy this and clone this into our CleanSlate themes folders. So I'm going to just go ahead and make a new window here, and I'll make this much bigger for you all. And I would say cd sites CleanSlate _themes, and then I type git clone to clone it. So if you see if you see red here that says, you need to clone your code repository, then go ahead and do that. If there are other errors here, you can note that in the documentation, it says if the build fails, run Vagrant provision until it completes. So if something else went wrong, copy this command, go into your terminal, paste it in there, and hit enter, and you will hopefully see your virtual machine, the Hammer virtual machine, work and start and work. So now that Hammer is built and running, we can actually go to localhost 2000 in our browser and see a list of our CleanSlate themes. So I have a number of CleanSlate themes on my machine, remember. So if I go here, you'll notice that the themes here are the same themes that you're seeing here. So, for example, art, board of governors, all that stuff is what you see here. So from this point, we can actually kind of explore around in our themes. If you don't have a theme that you want to work on, go ahead and go to Bitbucket and clone the repository, search for it, then clone the repository into your CleanSlate_themes folder, aka right in here, and then hit refresh on your localhost 2000 and it should show up right here. We're just going to go in here and explore a little bit. So if I click on our CleanSlate toolkit, this is the theme that we've been looking at for the entire tutorial series. Then I click views, and for example, maybe I want to view the back page. I can actually view the back page template here in my browser. All right, and we're going to cover some more stuff, especially about these warnings, all the stuff that Hammer is capable of here in another video. So after you have started Hammer, maybe you've done some work and committed your changes to the repository and pushed them, and maybe you're ready to leave your office for the day, what we recommend is actually stopping Hammer before, it's kind of like turning your computer on and off. You want to actually stop Hammer, stop the virtual machine, and that just kind of is a best practice, It's not necessarily mandatory, but it is helpful in certain situations. So how do you do that? In the documentation here, there are a number of commands. So one that we just did here is Vagrant up to start Hammer, and the one to stop it is Vagrant halt. So what we can do is we can come into our Hammer VM directory. You have to be inside the Hammer VM directory and type Vagrant halt, and it will actually stop the VM. And the benefits of this is it takes up, once you stop the VM, it frees up resources on your computer so that you can use them for other things. So there's some other things that you can do in here, but you probably won't do them as much. One that I do occasionally do is run Vagrant status to kind of see, is it running? And you also want to make sure that you're typing these into the Hammer VM directory. When I type Vagrant status, you can see that it is indeed powered off and it's no longer running at the moment. So keep in mind, if it's no longer running and I go back to my localhost 2000 and hit refresh, it's going to say, oh no, we can't reach that page because the virtual machine is no longer running, the server is no longer running. We can't see our themes locally because the thing that powers it is off. So if we want to turn it back on, we can type Vagrant up. And this time it's going to be a little bit faster than your first time. It'll probably take about 30 seconds. I'll go ahead and pause the video until it's done. And there we go. Hammer is now running once again after about 30 seconds. I can come back here and hit refresh, and our page is back. So that is starting and stopping the machine. How to install it, all pretty straightforward there. One thing that I am going to point out, which is kind of for the overachievers, you can actually add aliases to your terminal to kind of not have to type in like cd sites, Hammer VM, and then Vagrant up. You can just, an alias is kind of like a shortcut for things in your terminal. So some people have these set up on their computer where you can say, okay, I'll type in hammer dash start and hit enter, and it'll, no matter where I am, it'll do this command, which is to change directories to the hammer VM folder and then do Vagrant up. So if you are on an OS X operating system before Catalina, you would actually copy these commands, right? And then you would paste them into either your bash profile, bash RC, or profile. To show you how to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the root right here, and I am going to make this just a little smaller. So you go to the root right here. Root, not exclamation point. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to clean that up right there. I'm going to say list all the files, including the hidden files. And you'll notice that I got to probably zoom out just a little bit here. Let me see. I might have to make this bigger again. So yeah. So at the top up here, I have a bash underscore profile and bash RC file. If you want to edit the contents of these files, you can say we want to edit the contents of the bash profile file. I can just type open and then .bash profile, and it'll actually open that with the default editor. So in OS X, that's text edit. You can come in here, paste in these aliases, hit save, and then quit this, and then you could actually quit your terminal here. So I'm going to say exit, and I'm going to open a new window, make it big, make it even bigger for you all. And what I'm going to do is I can actually, now that those aliases are installed, I can say hammer start or hammer stop. So I can type hammer dash start, and it's automatically going to run that change directory command and do stuff. Since hammer is actually already running, it's going to give me an error right here, which is what all this red stuff is. But so, for example, let me say hammer stop instead of hammer start. And when I type hammer stop, it's going to stop the virtual machine and do that. So you can see how those might be helpful. If you are on OS X Catalina, they actually changed from using bash profile, and bash RC to using .z profile and .zshrc. So I make a note here that OS X Catalina and beyond users should put those aliases in the .zshrc file, which would basically mean that you go to the root and you would type open.zshrc and do the same process that we just saw. All right, so that last several minutes was all about just creating those aliases, those shortcuts. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can still just change directories from your sites into the hammer VM directory and type Vagrant up. If not, you can add those shortcuts, and it will give you the ability to type hammer start and have the VM start running and have a shortcut for that. In our next video, we are going to talk about actually using hammer and how it's useful for us with local development. So stay tuned.